You don't hear this from financial planners very often, but sometimes the right move isn't to save more, it's to live more. Today, I'm going to walk you through a real case of a couple who had already won the savings game and why I told them that they could ease off their contributions without jeopardizing their retirement. Now, this is not their real names, but I'm going to call them John and Jane. John's 59, Jane's 57. John enjoys his work. He plans to keep going until at least 65. And Jane says she's fine working until 63. They're both disciplined savers, like many of you. And John and Jane combined put about $36,000 into their pre-tax 401ks. Their current balances right now, John has about $800,000 in his 401k, and Jane has about $300,000 in her 401k. They also have $200,000 in a taxable brokerage account. Now, when we met, they told me that their target lifestyle in retirement was $9,000, maybe even up to $10,000 a month would be great, they said, if they could have that. Now, that's after taxes in today's dollars. Remember, they weren't trying to retire today. John's only 59, she's 57. They're talking 6 years out, when John's 65. So their question was, do we really need to keep saving this much? Are we on track? Where are we? And so here's what the numbers showed if they kept contributing until John was 65 and Jane was 63. So based on their current projections, they'd retire with the ability to spend about $11,000 a month, which is an inflation-adjusted net of taxes for life. So it's not bad at all. I mean, again, they only wanted to be able to spend $9,000 to $10,000 a month. So it's more than what they were hoping to be able to spend. Just because you can save more doesn't always mean that you should. This is their situation. So if they were to retire again in 6 years, they'll have about $2.2 million at that period of time. This is assuming they continue to make the contributions all along the way. And at that time, again, they will be able to spend $11,000. This is net. So this is net monthly in real dollars. That means in today's dollars, okay, after taxes. Now, by the way, you might be wondering what these other numbers are down here. So when it comes to devising the retirement income plans, I use a risk-based guardrails approach, and this is the Income Lab software. And so what this is actually showing is if their projected balance or if their balance actually reached at that period of time, this dollar amount, over $2.5 million, this is showing that they could actually be able to spend even more money, $12,600 in this case. Now, on the flip side, let's say that the markets don't do well. What this is saying is that if the portfolio was only at about $1.4 million, then they could only spend this amount. So again, I'm just kind of sharing that with you at a high level. But one of the questions they had for me that comes up a lot, what if we retire and, it's scary. We retire, we're no longer working, the paycheck is now completely stopped. And, we could live for another 20, 30 plus years in retirement. So what would happen if we were to retire in, one of the worst of times? And so that's where we stress test the plan. And so I'm not going to go through all of them here, but we do stress test the plan to see historically if they were to retire right before, let's say, the Great Depression or the post-war decade or the stagflation era, or right before the dot-com bubble, the tech crash, beginning of this century, or the global financial crisis, right around 2008, the end of 07 to 2009. So I'll just share that one here with you. So it's one of the things that we took a look at here. And you'll see, like in their situation, this is their pre-retirement right now. And then if all of a sudden now they retire and now we're here, it's the global financial crisis. And you can see that, this is their spending. This is in gross dollars before taxes, by the way. If that were to happen, they would have to take a $600 pay cut at that period of time. So this is one of the worst times in market history, and they would have to take a $600 pay cut here. And then it's not till later on where they would actually get a pay increase when they hit the upper guardrail, is what that's depicting here. Now, all the values here are in real dollars. So this is, not factoring in inflation. This is just saying this is how much we would be able to spend in today's dollars. So it kind of keeps that simpler. So that's only a $600 pay cut. And they said to me, okay, so you're saying, Ryan, we retire right before the Great Recession. You kind of historically, looking at these numbers, kind of worst case scenario, instead of spending $11,000, we're spending, $10,400. So again, that's just one of the scenarios that we take a look at here. So that's their baseline scenario. They're in really good shape. They only really wanted to be able to spend, $9,000, maybe $10,000 a month, but they're on track to spend $11,000 a month. And so that's when I said, well, let's go ahead and take a look at what would happen if you were to stop contributing to your 401k plans, except still contribute up to the match. So in John's case, if he contributed just 3%, then the company also would match 3%. And so for him, he would still contribute $4,500 for the year. The company would match $4,500. With Jane, though, the company didn't match, so we stopped those contributions. So in running the plan that way, the plan showed that they would have about $10,300 a month in retirement spending power. Now, again, that's $10,300 in today's dollars after taxes per month, when they retire. So let's pause on that just for a second. It was 11,000 versus now 10,300. So that's only $700 a difference, per month down the road when they retire. And both of the plans are well above the $9,000 to $10,000 lifestyle goal. And so the real trade-off, isn't can we retire? The real question is, should we start living more now? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Retirees rarely spend in a straight line. Most follow what's referred to as the retirement spending smile, where you have higher spending in the go-go years when travel and activity peak, and then lower spending in the slower middle years, and then a small bump typically later on for healthcare. Now, when we modeled this smile approach, if John and Jane stop contributions now, except John's still contributing up to the match, they could actually start retirement spending closer to $11,500 a month. That means more life now in the years when their health and energy are the highest, with a natural glide path downward later on, just like real spending tends to go. And when I asked them what more life now would actually look like, their eyes lit up. I asked them, I said, if you had an extra $2,000 a month of cash flow right now today, what would you do with it? And they mentioned a big trip somewhere, possibly with their grown kids, finally updating the 20-year-old kitchen that Jane's really been wanting to redo, maybe having just a few long weekends throughout the year to go hiking, visit friends, and just spending money, just enjoying life on different experiences. But it's not just about lifestyle, right? It's also about making sure that we're making smart choices with the money that they already have. And so that led us to three clear pathways here. Option A, they could keep contributing fully. They could stay the course. This would buy them about another $700 a month later on in retirement that they could spend. Option B, they could ease down their contributions. John drops to just the match. Jane stops altogether. This could free up thousands of dollars each month right now while still retiring on schedule. Option C, they could keep contributing, but spend from their taxable account. That way they still get the tax deduction today while using some of their $200,000 to help elevate their life right now today. And so here's the key. All three paths work here. The difference in part is when they get to enjoy more of the life that they're really working for. Of course, whenever we compare options, the next question is, what about taxes? And so let's clear that up here for a moment. Taxes definitely matter. I mean, let's be clear about that. If they ease down their contributions, right, option B, they'll lose today's deduction, but they preserve that taxable account. And that money in that taxable account could be crucial later on to help pay the taxes on any possible Roth conversions that they might do. It could also be utilized to help manage the subsidies for ACA, for the health insurance for Jane, because she was planning to retire at age 63. So there's definitely some benefits there. If they keep funding their 401ks on a pre-tax basis and spend the taxable now, which was option C, well, they would get the deduction today, and that's definitely great. They're certainly in a higher tax bracket, but they'll have less taxable cash later on to cover taxes if they were to do any Roth conversions or to help manage their income to help keep the ACA premiums low by potentially qualifying for subsidies. Neither path is wrong here. The better choice depends upon future tax brackets and how much you value your lifestyle today versus maximum tax efficiency later on. Now, let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. No matter which option they choose, risk and discipline still matter. So let's talk about something slightly different here for a moment. So they were invested in a moderate portfolio, and we talked about, being more aggressive, which on paper in their situation, still being 6 years out from retirement, I was definitely fine with them doing it. It could potentially provide them with even more income in retirement. And from a risk tolerance perspective, they weren't sure that they were comfortable with the yo-yo factor, so to speak. I call it the volatility of the market. The truth is, in their situation, they didn't need to take on more risk in order to meet their spending needs. They had already won the game. The amount of risk that they were taking was fine given their situation and to provide the income that they wanted in retirement. And so I told them, we run the numbers. You can stop saving so aggressively. Not because savings is bad. I mean, they're excellent savers, but because they've already won the game. They can keep working as planned. They could retire when John turns 65 and Jane turns 63. They can enjoy the lifestyle that they want. The extra contributions would buy some additional income later on in retirement if they wanted, but it would come at the cost of 6 years of deferring the life that they really want to be able to live right now. And so let's pull all the numbers together side by side here. All numbers are inflation adjusted and net of tax. In other words, this is the amount that they would be able to spend in today's dollars after tax. If they keep maxing out their 401, not maxing out, but they keep funding the 401ks at a pretty high level that they're doing until 65, they'd have about $11,000 a month in retirement to spend. If they ease down the contributions, they'd have about $10,300 a month. If they ease down the contributions, but incorporate that spending smile, they'd have about $11,500 a month to start, and then they would taper down naturally over time. So the question isn't, can they retire? It's when do they want to enjoy more of the life that they've worked so hard for? And that naturally raises the next concern. What about the curveballs? Because life isn't a straight line, right? Things happen. So we ask, what if one of them lost the job? Well, they'd have $200,000 in their taxable account, which would help give them flexibility. What about healthcare before Medicare? Well, if Jane retires at 63, the taxable funds can help manage her income for ACA subsidies. What about taxes later on? Well, we may schedule Roth conversions in lower income years, and taxable cash can help make that easier to pay the taxes. And here's a tough but real scenario. What if John had a health issue or passed away, let's say at age 67? Jane would suddenly be filing as a single taxpayer with higher brackets, and those extra contributions might not end up saving much in taxes after all. But they both would have missed 6 years of memories between now and retirement. And that's the trade-off that no spreadsheet can solve. And that's why this isn't just math. It's about values. At some point here, this stops being a math exercise and becomes a values exercise. Sure, you might be able to squeeze out a little bit more tax efficiency, but is it worth deferring a big family vacation or waiting years to update the kitchen that you use every single day? Or, maybe missing out on chances with, aging parents? For John and Jane, the answer was clear. Keep working, stop pushing so hard on savings though, and start living more now with confidence. And if you're in a similar spot, here's how you can start making that shift too. Compare both plans, continue contributions versus easing down, focus on lifestyle spending, not just balances. Managing taxes, do you want to preserve taxable account for having some flexibility or maximize your deductions now? And map your spending smile, front load experiences while you're the healthiest. And name the money. Literally write down the trips, the projects, the family moments that you'll fund over the course of the next, let's say 12 months, 24 months. That way you're not just stopping savings, you're starting something better. And that's exactly the kind of planning that I do with clients. If you're a great saver and you're wondering, do we still need to save this hard? Again, that's exactly the type of planning that I help with. To learn more about how I do that and to work with me, click on the link in the description. You take care, and I'll see you next time.